All right, folks, my name is Chris Burkard. I'm a Sony artisan and I'm a photographer, director. I wear all the hats. But today I'm going to talk to you about something super critical, which I know is a hot topic and maybe one of the most confusing and sort of complicated parts of this whole scenario that we call, the business of being creative, right? It's how to make the perfect pitch, how to pitch a brand on your idea, your concept. Now, one good thing to start any workshop off with is like, what is this and what is this not? This is not like how to grow and expand your business, how to necessarily like create a creative voice. I'm specifically honing in today on something singular because really when you have this amount of time, it's good to focus on one thing. How to pitch a brand on your idea, not when a brand comes to you and says, hey, so-and-so, we really want you to fulfill our creative concept. We want you to kind of bring our concept to life, right? Now, what's the difference? Well, a lot of us as creatives, you have ideas, right? You have a photo project, you have a film, you might have a video piece or something like that that you want to create. Maybe you're documenting, something like social justice work, or you're documenting riots, or who knows what they are, or you're documenting a crazy, fully self-supported crossing of Baffin Island, or the diminishing salmon in Canada. I don't know what it is. The point is that it comes from you. All right. And now the point of this whole thing is that when you pitch a brand, you're asking for usually a couple things. The first of all would be some sort of support, right? You're asking for their support. And now support can mean a lot of things. Gear, could be equipment, clothing, something like that. Could be money. It also could be their endorsement and their name on your project. Now, we're going to touch base on that more in a second here, but that's kind of the point of what you are asking from them. And the goal is that whatever they're giving you is there to support what you're trying to do. Now, what you're trying to do is you're trying to bring this project to life. Now, this project, whatever it is, Project X, let's say, it can have a lot of purposes. That project could be for the purpose of you accomplishing an expedition, or again, making a film, or what have you. So your goal is going to be to educate them on what your needs are, right? And then you're going to be educating them or letting them know what they can do to fulfill those needs. And then the most important thing, this is what brings it all together, is you're going to be educating them and telling them in this document, hopefully, or in your communication, what they can expect in return. Now, it's a bit challenging because with this limited workshop format, I don't have a ton of visual aids I can show you, but we're going to be cutting to some slides here. Over time and over the course of my career, I've made a lot of pitches. I've made a lot of good pitches, and I've made a lot of bad pitches. And what I mean by that is that I have tried over the years to get brands and magazines and really anybody I could to pitch into these big, crazy projects I've had. And sometimes I've been lucky, and sometimes I've been wildly unsuccessful. And today, really, the goal is I want to educate you on how to make the perfect pitch. Now, I'm not going to be able to go through a, day-long class on how to build a deck that's beautiful and laid out and how to work in InDesign. There's certain things you're going to have to take from this and learn on your own. But I want to give you the tools, or at least educate you on the process that I go through to make this happen. Product placement, right? So what do I do? Well, I come up with the idea, right? The idea is first and foremost, right? And I know that I want this idea to be compelling. And what I want to do is when I reach out to a brand, right now, for example, let's use a brand like Black Diamond, right? They're a clothing company. They're an outerwear company, and they make climbing equipment. So I might have a project where I'm like, I want to go climbing in Yosemite, okay? And I want to make a film about it, right? So it would be natural for me to reach out to this brand because they make gear that supports that. One of the biggest issues people have is that oftentimes they're trying to connect brands to projects that really just don't make sense, okay? Keep in mind, you need to comprehend and understand what are this brand's objectives Be a student of the companies or brands you reach out to. If you're blindly reaching out to companies, they know it. Why? Because it usually looks fairly cheesy and you don't often show or demonstrate the knowledge of what they're doing. What do I mean by that? Well, if you reach out to a brand and they're like, well, we just did a story like this, or you know what, we just featured that. Probably not the best brand. It doesn't also get you off on the right foot. Now, it's important to think about these brands in terms of what do I bring to the table, okay? And I'm kind of trying to go through a lot of these theoretical situations that you're going to have to talk about. You're going to have to address at some point, right? As a creative or the creator of this project, book, film, what have you, you have to think about what you have to offer that brand, okay? This is your currency. And your currency can be distributed or I guess aggregated to a number of different things. One of these currencies that you might work with might be your distribution. So if you make a film for a company, you want to discuss what you think the distribution might look like. Why? Because they want to make sure that their investment is worthwhile. So if you're like, hey, Black Diamond, I'm going to be doing a climbing film on Yosemite, and I already have these 3 distribution channels, outside TV and YouTube and whatever. They have all these followers. Great. For them, they're like, you know what, cha-ching, I'm going to put money towards that because it's going to get us all of these views. Great, no problem. Or your currency might be, I run a large social media network, or I have some influence in that network, and so I am going to be promoting this myself and inadvertently promoting you. Cool, no worries, cha-ching, we're going to invest in that. Or you're saying, hey, I'm going to be doing this project and it's going to be allowing you, and this is a more challenging one, but as currency, your name and likeness as an athlete, as a professional in the space gives them credibility. So if you're like, we're doing this climbing thing, I'm doing one of the hardest routes in the world, whatever, that allows that brand to have a currency that they couldn't buy otherwise, because you are then testing your route and showing the world that basically you could only do this with using their products, right? I'm just kind of trying to paint the picture here. So there are different forms of currency. That would be one of those currencies, okay? Now, how you demonstrate that currency, we're going to get into in a second here. That's an important factor to consider. But let's back up a second. Before we get into kind of like what you want, what they want, the ROI, return on investment, that we're going to talk about a lot here, I want to think about what's the first step. Okay, you're ready to push go on this project. You want to make it happen. So what would you do? Well, you think about your plan, your project, your goal. It might be your idea, it might be somebody else's, right? If you're pitching this project, there is sort of a sweet spot within brands or companies that makes the most sense. And what I mean by that is a lot of the larger brands, and I'm sorry, I'm going to take a quick little side road here to explain something. A lot of these larger brands, the Levi's, the Abercrombies, the Coca-Colas, they don't really have the budget to support these small projects. Why? Because they have huge, long, drawn-out marketing plans that they're usually working through an agency, and those agencies don't really have the opportunity to just take in pitches or projects. Now, the smaller companies, you know, potentially on the upper end of those smaller companies, the North Faces, the Patagonias, the Marmots, the whatever outdoor brands, they do look for open submissions, ideas, concepts, projects they can support. You have the kind of smaller brands like the Cotopaxis, you know, the Black Diamonds, they're right in the middle. You have a lot of these other brands who, you know, Topo Design, they're looking for concepts, ideas. If you bring something to them, there's a good chance they have budget for it and they are willing to support that. Now, how do you judge these brands? How do you, first thing is just word of mouth. Talk to friends. Talk to people in this space. Oh, has so-and-so athlete, runner, climber, photographer, filmmaker, whatever, worked with them? Great, they've supported it. Awesome. You don't need to just pitch your projects to brands. Could also be magazines, but I'm using this as a way to easily understand the size and the scope and the scale of these companies. Any brand that works with an agency is going to be more challenging to send a pitch or an idea to. And now, I'm not really addressing here a pitch that might go to Netflix or Amazon, like a film, that's a bit different. You'd want to be working with a production company and coming together to pitch something. You might even shoot a pilot, something different. I'm talking more about that personal project that you want to get off. That maybe you're going to, you want to document Lake Tahoe every single day of the year for a year. Who would that make sense for? Maybe a tripod company, maybe a camera company, maybe. The point is you use your brain and you figure it out, okay? I can't explain every single situation who you might pitch to, but the goal here is that you want to connect the most likely brands to what you're doing. And what you're doing comes from you, right? So that being said, let's dive into maybe a bit more of what that process would look like. You come up with this idea. It's a cool idea, right? You have a couple key players. Maybe they're athletes, maybe they're models, maybe it's whatever. You have those people kind of in your camp, in your roster. You also might have a couple other people to help you film it, to shoot it, whatever. Maybe it's just you, but usually it involves a group of people. You gather together your team, okay? The very first line of communication would ideally be, and these things are happening in parallel at the same time, your very first line of communication to that brand, how would it happen? Well, if it's a smaller brand, here's a quick tip. Everybody's on social media, okay? If you email a brand and you DM them, that's a fine way to try and reach out. I wouldn't waste your time reaching out to a huge, large, multi-million or billion-dollar Fortune 500 company, because the chances are that company's social media is run by somebody totally different who is in no way related to the marketing department or who holds the money. But smaller brands, yes, you're going to talk to somebody or you're going to write somebody who's probably sitting right next to the marketing director. Great. So that being said, you'd probably want to take that approach first because it's easy. Next step would be looking for an email, searching online, buying into one of those email databases. Third thing would be getting a contact from a friend. Hopefully, if your project has legitimacy, maybe you're working with an athlete who has contacts, so you'd be reaching out through one of their contacts. That's a great place to start. Any way you can get a connection, the better chances you have of getting money, right? Or getting support. Then, at that point, what you do is you would just email them your brief pitch, whatever that is, figure out the elevator pitch, right? If you have 30 seconds in an elevator, what would you say? Hey, so good to be in touch, yada, yada, yada. I've got this really big project coming up. It's going to be a first ascent of blank, blank, and blank. Or I'm doing this really amazing photo project that's unlike anything anybody's ever seen. Or I'm telling this incredible story about this family that immigrated from Cuba on a boat. Whatever that looks like, you are going to have this quick pitch, right? And your goal there is to capture their attention in the first few sentences, right? Boom. In that email, you might want to, or in a follow-up email once the conversation has started, or a call. You might get them on the phone and pitch your project and say, I'm going to follow up with blank, pitch deck, PDF, any sort of document that lays out visually what it is you're trying to do. Now, this is really where the bulk of making the perfect pitch comes to life, people. It's about creating that deck, that pitch deck that lays out beautifully what you're trying to do. Why? It's simple. You're a creative person, they're a creative person. When two creatives talk, what do they want to use? Their eyes. They want to see this thing. They want to engage with it, and they want to ultimately know what it is they're kind of buying into. How do you do that? Well, you jump on the computer and you design a pitch deck. What exactly is a pitch deck, right? A pitch deck is basically something that gives you and the person you're talking to a way to kind of visually engage and read through this project, right? While I'm talking, I'm hopefully going to have some slides that are showing you a couple different pitch decks. They can be very, very simple. I've made some that are terrible, where it looks like I made it in some first generation computer program, and then there can be some that cost thousands of dollars that are designed by a graphic artist. It really depends upon the project, right? The pitch deck or the PDF or the document is really the standard way that you would communicate with a brand, with an agency, what have you, on your project, right? Why? Because if you were to write out an email and just throw in a couple images, hey, we're doing this traverse of this place, this first ascent, whatever, what have you, here's what it looks like, here's the route map, here's all the info. Imagine that email getting forwarded to everybody at the company who needs to make decisions on it. That will be heinous, right? It'll be like forward, it'll have tons of junk in there. So to make it super clean, there's some programs you can use. The easiest program being Adobe Spark. Adobe Spark is an online website that basically allows you to include a link, and that link lives on the internet, and people can reshare that link and reshare it, and you can privatize it, whatever you want. That's a great way. They have formats so you can lay things out. Here's where text goes, here's where a map goes, here's where a photo goes. Really simple. You can also work in InDesign, you can work in Keynote on Mac, you can work in Photoshop, you can work in really anything you want, right? The most rudimentary thing is that it's photos and words laid out in a more eloquent and high-level perspective that allows the brand to get a feel for what you're looking for. Now, what might this pitch deck include? Well, the pitch deck should really include a number of things. First of all, you're the creative, you're the artist. You don't need to jump into this thing with like, here's how much money we need right here, first page. No. Back up a little bit. Ease them into it, okay? What's your artist statement? What's your vision? What's your goal? What's your mission statement, right? Everything you do as a creative should live underneath this mission statement. So you include that. Tell me a little bit of the history of why you want to do this project. Were your relatives affected by immigration or social justice? Is your best friend doing this ride across this country because they had cancer? Like, what is the backstory here? Why, right? Who, what, where? Next thing, again, super simple. You can guess that I'm going to say where, why, when, right? And how. The where is this taking place? Give me a map, show me the route, show me where it's happening, what are the dates, right? In the beginning, it should be creative, and then it should flow into pertinent information to get it done, right? What are the dates? Who is the crew? Portraits of the crew, the people that are with you, who's going, why, what are their skill sets, what do they bring to the table, right? This doesn't need to be 100 pages. This could be 10, this could be 3 if you wanted it to be. But ultimately, it should be probably more than 1, potentially. And I think the more elaborate, oftentimes, the more care and quality people see put into it, the more they're excited to buy into this. Now, super simply put, what you're looking for here is a way to generate all the important information so that anybody could pick this up, not knowing anything about the project, and say, I got you. They're gonna go do this. They want this, here's who's going, here's when it is, and then here's what we're gonna get out of it. So you also might wanna include in there towards the end, you'd probably want to include, here's what we want from the brand. We want X amount of money. We want X amount of gear. And you might even include a handful of potential tiers of support. I'm making a film. If you want to be a title sponsor, it's going to cost you this much money. If you want to be a credit sponsor, meaning your logo's at the end of the movie, it's going to cost you this much money. If you just want to be a contributor with some gear and a little bit of cash, we'll organically place your product in the video and you can pay us this much money. Or you might list out those things differently. It's irrelevant. The point is that you are going to list out what you want from them, and you don't have to include money in there. That can just be a starting conversation point, and then you can get them on the phone and actually negotiate what that might look like for their support based upon what they want, okay? And what they want should be your next slide or your next image. What they want is based upon what you can give. What can you give? This is where you might list an a la carte menu, so to say, takeout of like what they could have. Social tags, credit in the film, credit in the beginning, in the end, logo placement, organic product placement. I'm gonna make a little cut down for you guys at the end that shares me sharing what I used. I'm gonna give you raw footage. I might give you some images for social and digital and print use. You don't need to offer all that. I'm just telling you some of the things that you might be able to do. Hey, I'm gonna come and do a speaking tour for you guys afterwards where I talk about how we used it. These are all things you might be able to offer, and then they could be like, we want this, 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 and this. Great, how much does that cost? Here's how much it costs, okay? So this is where you start to list out what they should be able to get, what you can offer, and then the very last thing is beyond those things that they might want, right? What else could you offer them in terms of return on investment, ROI? Classic term, we hear it all the time. This is where if you're making a film or if you're making a sort of magazine article, you might list, okay, well, this is gonna be published in this magazine. Here's their outreach, right? Here's their subscriber list. Oh, this is gonna be published or live on Outside TV. Well, here's the viewing count that they get a month. This is gonna live here, here, here. That's one way. Maybe you don't have a lot to offer, but you are going to hope that this gets enough views to where it makes their investment worthwhile. And that is really to encompass the idea of this pitch deck, this brief, this treatment, so it's called. This is really what you want to include. Now, you might hear that word treatment in other places. As a commercial photographer, oftentimes a brand will be reaching out to me to do a job, and they're going to send me their treatment or their mood board or their creative brief. And it's kind of my job to send back a treatment, almost as if we're communicating in this weird language of treatments, right? The point of that is to show them, I understand your creative vision, here's my creative vision. Back and forth, yeah, right? Now, I know I said this before, but I want you to understand that there are moments, there are times where a brand may reach out to you with the hope and the goal that you are going to fulfill their creative needs, their marketing efforts with one of your ideas. And what I mean by that is you might have a watch company come to you and say, hey, so-and-so, we have a project coming up. We really want you involved. What ideas do you have? Awesome. Here's your opportunity to send over that creative briefing, right? And even big brands may be sending forward ideas or thoughts like this. Don't ever put it past them. It can happen. Yes, sometimes it takes a little bit more convincing. Why? Because typically they like to come up with the ideas, but if you have something really convincing and really compelling, heck, you could probably get that put into their budget. It's totally possible. Now, I think one of the key things when it comes to the perfect pitch is beyond the deck, the moment that you get somebody on the phone, I think that's when it gets really real, right? You wanna foster a level of enthusiasm about this trip that is second to none, right? That allows that person who may be sitting behind a cubicle waiting for something interesting to come across their desk. You want to fire them up, light their fire, get them excited about this. Like, this is a story that could bring a lot of joy to people. This is a story that could push your product into new and different marketplaces. This is a story that's going to be a megaphone for the awesome initiatives you're doing. Your goal is to sell this thing. Why? Because you want to create that level of excitement. And I know that if you've been working on this forever, you're going to have that level of excitement. If you don't, you should probably reconsider the project, because the ultimate goal is that this needs to come from you. It needs to be your idea. You need to be passionate about it, and you need to be willing to get people on board with that project. Once you get people on that call, the goal is to kind of start to lay out what's in the deck. Hey, let's go by page. Here's what we're doing. Cool. We start here. We go here. This is where we tell this story. We're making this documentary, whatever it is. At that point, you're going to really have the attention of the person because they're giving you of their time. They're jumping on the phone with you. They want to hear more, and it's your job to hopefully tell them. Now, you get done with that conversation, and what do they say? Oh, you know what? Shoot. This is great. We love everything. We really want to be a part of these things. We really want all these takeaways. We want all these asks, but man, we don't have any budget to spend, or we have very little budget. Can we just give you gear? No, don't do that. Don't just accept that thing. I mean, the one thing I would say is that yes, absolutely, by all means, if you need the equipment, take it. If you just need product support, take it. But there's always this tipping scale, and your gives, or the things that you're going to offer them, should always be lessened if they have to come in at a lesser rate, right? So yeah, you can just take this much money, but you're going to have to lower these things down. Never come in and just say, okay, well, all we have is this much. Okay, cool, I'll give you everything. One of the worst things you can do is overpromise and underdeliver. I feel like in this scenario, the goal and the way you move forward with working with brands again and again and again, creating successful long-term relationships, is being transparent, okay? And that leads me to another point, another conversation, a very important one. This is about educating the client as to how much it's going to cost to do the trip. Now, why is that important? Well, one of the things that's really important is when people see a big number, like, hey, I want $50,000 to do this trip from you guys. Whoa, okay, that's a lot of money. Or I want $5,000, or I want 500. Doesn't matter. When they see one big rounded off number, it starts to feel a little fishy, right? And I think as a brand, they start to feel like, man, like, is this person just making like a lot of money off this? So what's the goal? The goal is to educate. And when I say educate, I truly mean to give knowledge, right? To educate the brand on two things: how much the trip is going to cost to do, right? And what you're actually making from it. If you're doing a job for somebody, and you guys, I understand that this is kind of branching away from the perfect pitch into more sort of representation and bidding on jobs, but it's interrelated. This does not have to be in your pitch deck. This can be a follow-up conversation or a follow-up email or a follow-up agreement. And the goal here is that if you're telling the brand and if you're explaining that, hey, this trip to go do this race, to go do this initiative, it's gonna cost $45,000 just to get there and to eat and to pay the crew and to pay the models and to pay the permits and to pay. And you're like, I'm only making $500. I'm only making, 2% or whatever it is. Then they're like, oh, I get it, right? I get it. The costs associated are actually really high because you're delivering a lot. And you could say, hey, if you want to lower the fee, the best thing to do is we don't do all these deliverables. Or the best thing to do is like, hey, you come in at a lower rate, but ultimately it's not going to change the cost of the trip, right? So one of the biggest things, again, is that education factor. You're going in with the hope and the goal that you're going to not school somebody, but you're going to be letting them know clearly just how much and how far their money is going to go, right? So by breaking this thing out and by showing them, well, here's the production expenses, the expenses for the trip, and then here's my fees, my representation for your brand as an athlete, or my role as a director, or my role as a photographer. These services I'm rendering, they cost this much. It's not a lot, but in order for me to do the job, I need this much. Now, this is probably where things get the most sticky, and I think it's always important to hold your ground. And if you come in a situation where the very first time that you ask for some amount of money, they say yes right away, you might have left something on the table, and I would be very concerned about that. I think the other consideration here is to think about the fact that if you are just working with maybe some of your first companies, and you do want to make that great first impression, my one piece of wisdom that I would say is that in my experience, I've never seen somebody who's promised me a better rate in the future ever give me more money for that rate, right? If you succumb to a day rate or a fee that's only this much, they're always gonna think about how much they spent that one time, and the chances of you getting paid more, oh, I'm sorry, so-and-so, we don't have this rate, but guess what? Next time we'll pay you what you're worth. Not gonna happen. So be considerate of that and be aware. And it's okay to work with brands for free. It's okay to get your name out there. It's okay to just accept gear or whatever. But the goal and the point being is that you want to stand your ground and you want to know exactly how much value is on the table, right? One consideration too is that anytime you're pitching yourself or you're associating yourself, your crew, your brand with another brand, ultimately, there's an opportunity lost cost. And what I mean by that is that if Nike comes in and is supporting your film, well, that means no other shoe companies will be able to work with you because obviously that's the one. There's exclusivity there. So one of the things they're paying for is like, we're the only brand in this space supporting this project. That's fine, but that's something that should be paid for. That's something that has value. And you want to make sure that you're not giving away everything you have. Now, over the course of my career, I've been really lucky to get a lot of great projects funded. Projects like films, projects like photo trips, projects like personal assignments to go work on a book somewhere. These are really fulfilling. And one thing I would say is that if you, as a creative person, have the ability to sort of have a backlog of these projects, this is awesome. COVID, this is a great time to actually sit there and design a whole number of pitches that then when the budgets are available, you can send out. How sweet would it be to be able to send out a pitch deck to a brand when you know that they're spending money again, or you know traveling's open again, to be like, boom, I'm ready. I'm above everybody else because I'm above the curve. I can operate quicker, I can operate faster, and more professionally than other people who are just sitting there bummed out during this time period. Now I feel like this skill set is super critical. It's super critical to have, it's important to know and understand, but you don't have to do it on your own. If you are bidding out that great, big, awesome project, reach out to a great designer, reach out to an awesome friend who has the skills to build something. One of the biggest pieces of advice that I can offer you is don't get good at something you don't want to do. It's never good to do, right? And I think that's kind of the key component here is like, if you have the opportunity to work with somebody else and collaborate and give them the vision for what they want, and it's affordable, reach out to somebody, have them help do it for you. Because I think the reality is that the effort you put into this pitch deck, this PDF, this keynote, whatever, it reflects upon you and your passion for the project. Now, this is such a bummer because I wish that we were all here in person and I could answer all these questions, because it's such a complicated topic and so much of this is really based upon what you want to know. And ultimately, people always ask, what to charge? What do I ask for? Well, it depends on what you need, right? It depends on how many brands you can actually include in the project you're doing. Can you organically place them in the project? Are they brands that you're using? Are you going to have to force them? What does that mean? What is the workload going to look like? The worst thing you want to do is get into a situation where you're trying to like appease 10, 20 companies for $200 a piece. That sucks, right? Much better to work with 5 brands paying $2,000 a piece, right? So really consider that workload, right? You don't want to ever cut yourself short. I hope that if you guys have questions, reach out to me in DM, write a comment, whatnot. I'd be happy to help you. And I hope that you guys can understand that this is an art and it takes a lot of time. And I think that it's as much of an art as negotiating, because the business of photography is tricky. It's complicated. It always will be. And I hope you guys have the best of luck on your journey. And I hope I get to see you soon. And thank you so much for joining Cando 2020. Cheers.